The problems facing New Zealand's primary sector have been mounting at a rapid pace. So I think it's time for open hearts and open minds. Now, my haere mai, and welcome to our last week of Sarah's Country for the year of all years, 2020. For many in the primary industries, growing and farming food and fashion, not much may have changed because of COVID, but there is an issue that many of you listening and watching probably don't want me to talk about. It's affected each and every single one of you this year. You've gotten a year older. Now, whilst we were on holiday, whilst we are going to be on holiday, I'm going to be able to officially call myself mid-30s. Seems so old, but to many of you, you go, oh my goodness, you're still a spring chicken. But there's yet one young man who thinks that he's over the hill today at the mere age turning the big 26, Mr. Joel Rock. And so of all of you watching us live, I'd love you to join me in saying a very big happy birthday to Sarah's Country's favourite Irishman. There is Joel Roach, John Roach, my apologies. They're very similar in name from MPI. He's a pretty cool Irishman, but Joel is certainly our very treasured Irishman here at Sarah's Country. So if you're watching along live, please don't be shy in wishing Joel a very, very big happy birthday. Joel, I don't want you to worry about getting older because this is going to be the oldest that you've ever been. Did you know that?
Oh, yeah, fair. I mean, you've got a point, yeah.
How are you feeling about knocking on 30?
Am I knocking on 30? Is that what we're... Jeez. Oh, I didn't even think about that. I was like, oh, mid-20s, you know, it's still cool. I'm still kind of young.
Well, then you just hold on to that because, I mean, you're not getting older. You're actually just becoming a bit of a classic. So there is a lot of things to look forward to because I do want to read some of these. And I think what I'm going to do is read a couple of them throughout the show. Joel, do you think that you're getting old if your grandmother texts you a link to something on Facebook? Have you had a few moments like that with old people?
Oh, yeah. No, Granny sends me stuff all the time. Granny and Mum. Yeah, I get all kinds of weird wee links to all kinds of... It's mostly pictures of birds, to be fair, which, you know, very on brand. But
she texts that to you? Like my grandmother, she sent me this big list of all of the things that I thought I'd share with you, Joel, because it's appropriate of how you know when you're getting old. One of them here, there's quite a long list. Age 60 might be the new 40, but 9 o'clock is the new midnight. The older you get, the earlier it gets late. So therefore, but I think you're obviously not knocking on that, are you? You obviously stay up a lot later.
Yeah. I'm not quite going to bed at about 8 in the evening, straight after the show.
No, like I do. I run like the winded is one. Are you at that point yet?
Yeah, but that's not so much to do with age. That's more diet, I'd say.
And this is a good one. When I say the other day, I could be referring to any time between yesterday and 15 years ago.
Yeah, that's fair. I do that. Time is relative. It makes no sense.
Now, look, tell us, you've celebrated your birthday in the weekend and had a good time. Can you share with our viewers and listeners a little bit of what you got up to? Oh, he's getting old. He doesn't even know how to turn his mic on.
Yeah, I turned the wrong mic on there. No, to be fair, we didn't do too much this weekend. I bought myself a guitar. That was quite nice. But we're going to Mount Cook next week. We're going to go for a wee dander round around there. So it should be quite fun.
Nice. I'd love some 20s advice for Joel in the comments live. We've had one come in from Jock Innes saying, you are a spring chicken, Joel. But, what are some of those things that 20-year-olds think that it's the end of the world when they're getting old, don't they? Some of those things to make the most of your 20s. And there's plenty of years of wisdom from our regular viewers, I know. So please, I'd love you to share some wisdom for Joel and how to stay young and make the most of your 20s. And of course, please do a shout out and wish Joel a very, very happy birthday, 26 today. Now, if you're new to Sarah's Country, I'm Sarah Perry. I'm your host, and we produce this show 3 nights a week live in alliance with New Zealand's favourite rural newspaper. And we may be a bit biased. Farmers Weekly is hitting your mailboxes with the last edition of the year. And the latest edition is dedicated to the land champions of New Zealand, selected from editor Brian Gibson. And I'm excited to bring you a yarn with some of them each night this week as we round out the year, and we will be back with you mid-January. Of course, we have on Sarah's Country's edition this week. We went last week, actually, me and the birthday boy. We visited 4 of the finalists in the Zimmatic Sustainable Irrigation Awards, celebrating the forward-thinking farm management happening with irrigation in this country. From the environmental improvements irrigation can bring by building up soil carbon to the innovation of variable rate irrigation on paddocks you wouldn't imagine running a pivot over. I can tell you this, 25 degrees some of them were at. The finalists were inspirational in their own right, but it was Mid-canterbury dairy farmers Ted and Sue Rollinson, farming at Dorrie, south of Christchurch, who were the New Zealand winners. So after 7:20 in my very first out of the studio interview, whilst I was at the Rollinsons' home, we captured a yarn on the couch with both Ted and Sue, who have had over 4 decades of farming in the face of adversity, which was people thinking they couldn't do what they have achieved, which was dairy farming in what is one of the biggest regions, dairy farming now in New Zealand. And it's a really great yarn about how they've achieved a sustainable water management, environmental outcomes, and growing their intergenerational business. So that will be up very shortly after 7:20. Then at 7:30, we continue to discuss water, as it is an essential paired with soil, the 2 most important ingredients in a successful farm. And water quality is of the utmost importance to our audience here at Sarah's Country and to the people of the Pomahaka Water Care Group, where the proof is in the pudding. The landowners can and have been leading changes to improve water quality for some time now, and I know very passionate about this is dairy farmer Lloyd McCall, who will discuss with us about how they've become a driving force behind water quality, not only in their catchment, but the wider Otago region, and one of our awesome land champions in this week's Farmers Weekly. To close the show, New Zealand is ranked 4th globally, did you know this, for innovation potential in our biotech field. Biotechnz Director Zahra Champion will explain the opportunities and future in our biotech industries coming up. But firstly, I know this man is a champion in the eyes of many Southlanders as the coordinator for the Southland Rural Support Trust. Lindsay Wright will share with us very shortly his journey of why he decided to lease out the farm, prioritise his mental health, and help others.
This is Sarah's Country.
Growing a better world takes courage. It takes foresight and vision. It's about dreaming big, then being brave enough to follow that dream through. To create a world where food is plentiful, soils are healthy, and rivers run crystal clear. A world where we grow more with less, where livestock is tended to with care. Energy is friend, not foe, and waste is a valuable resource. This is the world you're already shaping through imagination, innovation, and determination. So as small steps become huge leaps, you move boldly forward. And Rabobank is there beside you to help grow a better world together.
Welcome to Sarah's Country. If you have just joined us, the comments that we are discussing throughout the show is something that we all experience every single year. It's called getting older. And of course, our producer, Joel Rock, is celebrating the big 2-6. Of course, not over the hill by any means, but of course we are sort of talking about those funny things about getting old, and I'd love some advice about how to make the most of your 20s for Joel. I'm certainly past that point, but here's one, Joel. These are comments from my grandmother that she texted me, and she likes these wee funnies that she finds on Facebook. Where is it? When you do squats, are your knees supposed to sound like a goat chewing on an aluminium can stuffed with celery? Probably not. And then I'm looking down here is I finally got 8 hours of sleep. It took me 3 days, but whatever. I know a lot of farmers listening to this will totally understand. And Joel, I like this one. This is my absolute favourite. I had my patience tested. I'm negative. Now, there's some great birthday comments coming in. Thank you so much. Of course, our regulars. Jock says, happy birthday, Joel. Spring chicken. Michael, happy birthday, Joel. To stay young, keep ahead of Sarah. He can try that every single year, Michael, but I don't know if he'll beat me. That is in age, that is. Keep getting older, Joel. The alternative is not a good one. That's from John Williams. And Sarah Elliott is joining us. Very excited, as I explained, about our out-of-studio interview, our very first one here on Sarah's Country with Ted and Sue Rollinson, Zimmatic Sustainable Irrigation Award winners for New Zealand, very, very shortly. But of course, kicking us off tonight is a very inspirational man who is going on to help many, many others. There were some difficult life experiences that Lindsay Wright thought for months about what to do with the fourth generation family farm. The uncertainty was adding to his depression, and in the end, the decision only took a few minutes to make once he started processing this with a counsellor to address his health issues that this was causing. Lindsay Wright is now the coordinator of the Southland Rural Support Trust and helping many farmers who may be feeling or going through something similar to himself. And he joins us now on Sarah's Country. Lindsay, thank you so much for taking the time to join us, and congratulations on being put on a pedestal as a land champion in New Zealand and Farmers Weekly this week. I absolutely 100% back that. Let's talk about that particular moment where you realised the only thing to do was to lease out something that had been in the family for so many years.
It was a pretty big decision, Sarah, I have to say, and it was the culmination of a whole period of time. I think I'd been on the way down for about 6 to 9 months, feeling worse and worse and worse inside, and I'd like a heavy weight in my chest. I could almost feel like I couldn't breathe at times. It was so heavy and so physical, even though it was a mental problem. And when I finally accepted that I needed to get someone, went to the counsellor, that took a while of unpicking before the counsellor kept saying to me, so what are you wanting to do here? What are your options? And we had 4 options down on a piece of paper. And I couldn't make the decision because I wasn't making any money. So to put a manager on was going to cost me more. I didn't want to sell the farm, so I wanted to keep farming, or I could have leased it. And I could have stayed as I was. But even when I was at counselling, that was going around and around and around in my head every night. Each option had a positive and a negative about it. And so the thing with depression is that it's very difficult to make decisions when you're in that space. So I agonised for a while, and then she said to me one day, let's have a look at these decisions you've got here. Have you decided? And I said, no, I haven't. And then she said to me, tell me what you don't want to do. And I kind of thought, well, how do you mean? And she said, well, do you want to stay as you are? I said, no. So she said, well, cross it off the list. You don't want to do that. Then she said, do you want to sell? Now, fourth generation family farm, no pressure. No, didn't want to sell the farm. So I'm down to 2, leasing or put a manager on. Do you want to put a manager on? Well, I wasn't making money, so putting another $70,000 on the expenses wasn't an option. Take it off. And there we were with the one obvious solution was to lease. And I couldn't believe how easy it was to make the decision, but it took the help of somebody else to make it. And that was the key thing. Somebody else was there to help me step through.
I mean, I know we can carry on about your story because it's absolutely incredible, and there's some full-length, amazing articles in this week's Farmers Weekly about our land champions, of which Lindsay is one. But just whilst we're on this topic of age, Lindsay, I mean, the who you deal with the Southland Rural Support Trust is of all ages. Do you think that your age helped you, or was it a stage in life that you had to come to?
It was probably a help, but also the cause. We quite often do get people in the rural support clientele who have reached that kind of late middle age, and maybe the succession plan hasn't gone right, or they're just not quite sure where to go. Or I've got a personal little hunch that maybe us blokes, we've got a great plan for life, and when we get to our 50s we suddenly think, well, maybe I'm not as successful as I thought I was going to be, but what am I going to do, because I've invested my life in this. So yeah, it certainly with the rural support work, it does help to be of an age where you've lost a bit of skin on the way through, and you can sit with somebody and say, I don't know how you feel, but I know what's causing it, and I can understand why it's causing it or making you feel like that. Yeah.
And also about the timing as well. I mean, you went through Rogernomics, like a lot of our viewers and listeners remember that intimately well. Do you think that things would have been different if you were farming in this particular climate versus then?
Yes, probably, because that Rogernomics and me coincided with getting my first mortgage. And I mean, that was a real lesson in life. I came home from the rural bank with a mortgage, wondering how if I was going to pay it off. And within a couple of months, Rogernomics had taken SMPs off. My income had halved literally, and my mortgage was the same, and I had to kind of make it work. So I learnt very early on that you just had to knuckle down and make do in some way if you're going to get through. And that stayed with me for nearly 25 years. And it was the good times in 2001 too that actually put me off my step, because things came right. I started to spend a bit of money, to do a bit of upgrading, and that was what started me on the downward slip when it went wrong. When those prices backed off, I ran out of money because I'd changed my spending patterns. And so, yeah, nowadays, I think nowadays is different. I'm almost pleased I'm not farming now.
Yeah. I think the thing is too, is that I'm just assuming that that sense of failure must have been terrible. And I say the word sense of because there was no failure, but it's really about putting your priorities around, your life. I mean, for you, your health, your marriage, your family, I mean, were they always at the top, or did you need to reprioritize through this to realize what life was all about?
It was a really tough process, because I felt like I had everything. I mean, up until that point where it went wrong, yeah, family was great, marriage was great, farm was going along, I thought, fine. And then when it went wrong, it was just so confronting, because you don't know what to do. And the problem with that depression is that it stops you making good decisions. Or if you make a decision and it's no good, you just reinforces in yourself, see, you can't make any decent decisions, so you're no good. And very quickly you start to doubt yourself. From going from hero to zero, it was about a 9-month period. It was that quick.
I liken the quote here that point of spilling my guts on the floor was a release valve. I think that we're always going to be processing our stuff for our whole life. But, if you hold it in, you know what it's like. But if you hold it in, anonymous in your body, it doesn't go well. So why do we think that we need to keep holding this stuff in and not processing it?
Stigma. It's the stigma of having to admit to somebody else that I'm not in a good space. And that is just so hard to do. Like I spent, I don't know how many years leading up to it, shifting sheep on the road, meet the neighbour, how you going? Good. And I wasn't good. But I kept saying it, and I kept saying it. And every time I said good, I felt a little bit worse because I knew I wasn't telling the truth. And eventually I changed, and I thought, I can't say good anymore because I'm not. So I changed, and neighbour would say, how you going? I'd say, battling on, which was to him supposed to mean good. But to me, I wasn't lying because I was really battling on. But I mean, I still hadn't admitted to anybody that things weren't going well. And so that going to that counsellor for the first time was just absolutely, it was so cathartic because I just let it all out. I didn't realise how wound up I was until I couldn't even get the yes out. She asked me how I was, if I had some problems, and as soon as I started to say yes, I just broke, and that was it.
And then, of course, the turning point in this story and the journey that you're on now is answering the ad to establish the Southland Rural Support Trust. But Southland has so many adverse weather events, and of course, it's a different way of farming that people don't seem to understand a lot of the time. And I mean, the snowstorm striking Southland straight up as a coordinator must have been a full-on experience for you.
Yes, I can't deny that. We, as the trust, we'd started up in 2008, and I just joined up because I'd finished with farming. I'd leased, and I was looking for some things to do, and the ad came along. I put my hand up and said, I'm available if I'm any use to you. So that's how I got involved. In 2010, so that was the year I became chair, and that year I was elected chair 2 days after the stadium collapsed. And so it was the trust's baptism of fire or baptism of snow, and as me going in as chair, it was like, wow, what am I doing here? But we learned a lot in a hurry. And so, it's just been a real learning curve, but also it's just so rewarding when you've come away from something like that and you know that you've made a difference, you've helped somebody. When they're under pressure like that, people aren't thinking straight, just as you aren't when you're in a depression. And so to be able to give people something to hang on to, a direction to follow, is just so fulfilling for us as rural support members, because we're not clever. We're just people that have been through life and we've maybe experienced it ourselves in the past. And if you have experienced it, then you can sit with somebody and listen and understand.
That sense of purpose is something that's so huge. And sometimes it could be the sense of purpose of achieving one thing that day and then the next foot in front of the other. And then it just builds and builds and builds from there. And one question that we get a lot is not so much what happens if I'm suffering, but how can I help others? And you're doing this on a regular daily basis. How do you navigate that first initial conversation and then actually follow up with it, as opposed to, how you going? Fine. And then that becomes about it, digging deeper and supporting for a longer term?
It's an interesting process, and to visit somebody on farm, or even if it's a telephone conversation, it doesn't matter, but you've got to establish a sense of trust and a sense of connection between you and the client. So a lot of the visit is actually just establishing who each of us are, what we're here to do, getting some trust, and then just saying, so what can we do to help? What's the situation? And let the person tell you what their situation is. I don't know their situation. They have to tell me before I can help them. And I mean, as I say, I'm not a clever person in any particular field, but to hear somebody's situation, the thing that the Rural Support Trust has is a lot of connections with the agencies, the people who are professionally trained to be able to help people. So we, after an hour and a half, can say to somebody in the conversation we've just had, you've mentioned maybe you need some help on the farm, or you've mentioned that finances aren't going well, or you've mentioned that you're really lying awake at night and can't deal with stuff anymore. So from that, we would suggest to them, should we get a farm advisor in? Would you like us to arrange a visit to a counsellor? Would you like us to get a financial advisor? And those kind of things. And it's getting people to find their own solutions. Because if I find a solution for them, they're probably not going to listen. They've got to find their own solution. They've got to own their own solution so that they will then act upon it. And the thing that the Rural Support Trust does is help them step across that line to start the process.
And I think the thing I love the most about what Rural Support Trust do is that the turning point for a lot of people can be in the power of relatability, and those farmers that can actually have a yarn to you and go, you know what, mate, I've been there too. And that it's very daunting to go to a counsellor when you've got an attitude of, well, what the hell do they know about farming? They don't understand my situation, et cetera, et cetera. And just actually getting to the point of processing a situation, and the tools are the same regardless of the circumstances.
Well, there's two things that are really powerful. The first thing is recognizing that somebody has got some problems and being able to say that to them. I can see that what you've got going on is really tough for you right now. So you recognize that they've got a problem. It's not my problem, it's their problem, and I see it. So I've got empathy for the situation. Then another most powerful thing you can do is say, what can I do to help? What can Rural Support Trust do? What can I do to help? It's just so simple, and keeping it down to that level. It doesn't have to be rocket science. You don't have to be an expert in mental health to talk about mental health. It's just another subject. And if we can all learn to add those extra questions in our day-to-day conversation, even if somebody hasn't got a problem, just learn to ask those open questions. What's been happening for you? Find out.
Yeah.
And then you get that conversation going, and that's where you find out what's really going on. How are they coping with the situation that's happening? And it's not jumping out of the car and asking the hard question straight away. And it's not even a hard question. It's about having the conversation that you would normally have with somebody when you are meeting them as part of your day-to-day, going about your business.
And it's that shutdown from overwhelm that we often talk about. And Doug Avery's highlighted it around those ways of dealing with one problem at a time. And can I strongly encourage any listeners and viewers, if you're worried about anybody, you pick up the phone and have a yarn to the likes of Lindsay or your coordinator in your area and say, look, I'm worried about so-and-so. They can't ring them directly. However, Lindsay, you can sit down and just get a list of things of that overwhelm and process one thing at a time, because realistically that's what happens when you're in that state, right?
Absolutely. And I can remember back at the depth of my process journey going through, I was so incapable of making a decision. I had my kitchen table covered in post-it notes, and each post-it note had one job on it, and it was the jobs were even down to going to get the paper, and my only rule for myself was that one of those post-it notes had to be gone by the end of the day. That's the level I'd got to, but I needed that kind of process just to tick things off one at a time until I could manage a full list of things to do. So it's a strange place, and when you look back at it, you wonder how you ever got there and what it was that brought you to that point. But you can get through it, and sometimes you just need a bit of help, and that's what Rural Support's for.
Do you know what? I honestly believe you get there because you've been ignoring it for so long. And I love the fact that this title of the article that features Lindsay Wright in this week's Farmers Weekly is called A New Lease on Life. And those sort of hard decisions can sometimes be the absolute game changer in the next chapter of your life. So please check out farmersweekly.co.nz, that amazing story featuring Lindsay Wright. I'm just going to say one of the key things when I was in an absolute bottom of bottom, I couldn't even check my voicemails. It was just too much. I think they got to, 30, 40, whatever. And so therefore the littlest things become the biggest things in your life. So if you're feeling like you're reacting to things that should be very, very simple for you to deal with on a daily basis, start to take a breath and a step back and actually start to analyze it. And there is all the support in the world. I have to say that. And start with the Rural Support Trust. Thank you so much to Lindsay Wright for joining us on Sarah's Country. And of course, Neil Wallace for bringing us that story as well. Now, after the break, I know we've got some excited people in the comments here below, tagging flat out so everyone can tune in to watch the fabulous New Zealand Trailblazer Awards, proudly brought to us by Zimmatic. I caught up with Ted and Sue Rollinson from Dory near Pendarvis in South Canterbury, near Rakaia, and how they've achieved sustainable water management. Ted and Sue, in all of their decades of farming, have achieved incredible nateness, just as much as they have when they said, you know, we are going to farm dairy cows on this country. They were the third dairy farmers in Canterbury in the 80s, and how far they've come to using the absolute latest technology in irrigation. Please make sure you stick around and check out this next interview. You will thoroughly enjoy it as much as I did.
This is Sarah's Country.
Well, if you've just joined us, we are in our very first out on farm interview for Sarah's Country. And I tell you what, I've enjoyed being out on the road so much. I feel in 2021 we may need to do a few more of these because, of course, this is where it all begins and stops and starts, isn't it? Behind the farm gate. Myself and Joel last week were out filming on behalf of Zimmatic for the Trailblazer Sustainable Irrigation Awards. And we're here in the home of the New Zealand winners, Ted and Sue Rollinson. So Ted, can you give us a bit of an idea for our listeners and viewers, you know, where we are situated in New Zealand and the sort of operation that you're running here, the size and the scale of it as well?
Well, we are 75 k's south of Christchurch. The big salmon on the main road, we're exactly halfway between there and the sea, a little place called Dory, and we're on a private little irrigation scheme that covers 1,055 hectares, and it's 4 farms and we're one of those.
So it's been an incredible journey from Murchison to Canterbury back in the early 80s. You know, what's it been like?
It's always a challenge. I love challenges. I've always told the children there's no stress in life. It's a challenge. And if you meet your challenge, you'll be happy with yourself. And Ted wanted to get bigger, and we wanted to be able to help other families into dairying so that they can have their own assets in the end. And when people have their own assets or take ownership, everybody's happy in the community. And I love the community feeling. We don't have it so much now because there's not many farm owners. It's mainly share milkers and contract milkers. Share milkers are really good at staying in the area for a long time. So it's a new concept of contract milkers and share milkers and dairying because it was always farm owners. And then we just had managers and they'd move after 2 or 3 years. But we're going back to the community ownership, which is really good. I just like being around the dairy. I just love being in the country. We do have a house in Christchurch and everybody says, oh, when are you moving? I'm not. I'm here forever. And I just want to stay here. And so do the children. They all grew up. They've all got dairy farms themselves. So it's in our blood.
I mean, Ted, there must have been a lot of people thinking that you were mad back in the day, and a lot of courage to go dairying when no one else was in this particular area. But it was backed by research, yes.
Yes, well, the Winsmore Research Station showed that dairying in Canterbury was very, very viable and the return on the asset was really good. So that gave us a lot of confidence, and John Rodley and Don McDonald, the 2 previous farmers that were here before me, I watched their write-ups, and it was very obvious that irrigation and fertiliser, a bit of nitrogen, hot northwest weather, grew grass, and the cows just milked because they love sunshine.
40 years ago, you started here with simple border dike irrigation, and irrigation's come so far. Can you explain that journey?
Well, Canterbury is not successful with dairy without water. If you went back in history, the rabbits would have to carry their lunch across the plains here to have enough food to get to the end of the day. So they've gone from that to irrigation water to dairy, and it's horticulture around here as well. So water is the kingpin for Canterbury. And a lot of people talk about the expense of water, but it is so minuscule, the expense compared to with the returns that we get from it.
See, there's so much misunderstanding, isn't there, with regards to, bringing the irrigation, and it's going to intensify beyond, all environmental outcomes, but simply not really that true.
Well, irrigation and nitrogen applications are a great combination, and we manage our water and we don't over-irrigate. We don't leach the nitrogen out through the soil like the perception is, because it's all managed, versus a heavy rainfall is the only exception, and we don't get many of those in Canterbury. So the the pivot irrigation is the best plan we can have for managing the environment.
Can you tell us a bit about the technology and how far it's come in irrigation?
Well, Sue and I have built the infrastructure on the farm, and Tom actually manages the technology and that sort of thing. He would actually be better to ask than me. So somewhere along the line, you better ask him.
You mentioned Tom there. He's an integral part of the operation as your share milker, and of course integral to this winning of the awards.
Yes, but particularly Tom's been here 11 years now, and that's a credit to him, but it's a credit to both of us really, because we get on really well together, and that works a dream. And as I said, we've built the infrastructure, and Tom's managed the farm and he manages the irrigation, and there's a lot of technology involved with that, and he works through that and does particularly well.
Ted and Sue, it's been incredible travelling around the country and meeting the finalists from Central Otago through to Canterbury, but learning more about how amazing variable rate irrigation is. Can you explain to our listeners and viewers a little bit more about that?
Well, VRI, that's the variable rate irrigation, is really important for keeping the water off cow races. We stop the water when it's going over the effluent pond, and we stop it going over the calf sheds. And when we cultivate a paddock and put it in new grass, if it doesn't need water, Tom actually just clicks on the VRI and excludes that whole paddock when the pivot's going over. So it's a very important piece of technology for us to use to stop any nitrate leaching and to conserve water.
So how important is it for you and your family's sustainability in farming to ensure that you have that balance between, the economics of farming and, of course, the environmental?
We actually couldn't work if we didn't work along those lines, because all of us on the farm, Tom and Leanne and Ted and I, are very conscious of our environment, and we need to leave it in and guide it through to an end that is sustainable for years and years and years to come, because there's no point of reaping the ground when there's nothing to return. So we have to do it. It's not a case of why we do it. We just have to do it so that everybody survives. Mm. It's not just us, it's the community, it's our families, it's everybody.
My mission statement is to be sustainable, to be economical, and to be healthy. And there are three words that actually mean a lot. We have to be sustainable for the environment because that's regulated now, and we understand that fully, to keep the rivers clean and that sort of thing. And we have to be economical, otherwise we wouldn't succeed. So that's extremely important as well. We've got kids to rear, and fortunately now we've got 3 kids, and the whole 3 of them have got dairy farms now. And they've all delivered grandkids, so that's very important. And to be healthy, that's very good for us at our age, that we have to be healthy. but we have to be healthy for the farm and healthy for the rivers and healthy for all that as well. So that's how I see my submission statement.
Ted, I'm going to utilise the opportunity, of course, in all of your decades of farming, to source your opinion, I think, on the future of farming and some inspiration to the next generation that we can actually achieve these outcomes in such a heavily regulated environment.
Yes, well, I think dairying's got a huge future for producing food for New Zealand and product for export for this country, and it's proven it in the past and it's going to continue it in the future. We certainly need some more tools in our toolbox to help the environment. And I can give some examples. The NUMBV, that's a measurement of nitrogen or nitrates in urine for cows. Through breeding, they now know they can reduce that by 28%. But if we could have had some gene editing or something along that line, we would make huge progress on that in a very short time. Another example is New Zealand produced a ryegrass some 20 years ago that reduces nitrate leaching and reduces greenhouse gases. Unfortunately, it's a GM grass and we're not allowed to use it. So science has moved a heck of a long way over the last 20 years, but the conversation in the community and the country has not moved at all. And all I'm suggesting is it's time for a debate on that, because if we could have some of those tools, dairying could make some big increases in helping the environment.
Well, if you've just joined us, and congratulations on behalf of all of our listeners and viewers on winning the New Zealand section of the Zimmatic Sustainable Irrigation Awards, of which myself and Joel got the privilege and pleasure of filming the 4 finalists last week for Zimmatic. And of course, we have to extend our congratulations to the Australian who took out the overarching awards. So it's a fantastic awards, and can I seriously encourage those who may look at entering it in the future, because you know what, sometimes you think that you may not be doing amazing things, and that was the one thing I did hear a lot of the time from New Zealand, this bloomin' tall poppy syndrome. But you don't know how much people can learn from your individual understanding of it, and how you've been able to shape it towards not only your farm management systems, but also too in the wider, as Ted says, his work there with the Rakaya Water Users Group, and how they can shine light on the uses of irrigation as a positive for the environment. So congratulations to all those involved with that wonderful awards. And the amazing man that Tom, the share milker, who's been with them for 11 years, said to myself and Joel off camera, if we are leaching nitrogen, nitrates and nutrients into the waterways, then we're effectively bad farmers. We want to utilise every uptake of that to grow grass, because fundamentally that is how we make money. And he was 100% supportive of Ted and Sue's on very valuable land putting in a massive storage dam. And these on-farm storage dams are going to be, in my opinion, the way of the future. This government has said that is the direction that they want, and so therefore I think we need to learn and embrace from those who have done it how we can actually see the economics of that, and therefore be able to take ourselves forward to future-proof our farms here in New Zealand, as we are only going to see warmer and drier climates. And, you know, we have all the skill sets here in this country to be able to share amongst regions, to be able to future-proof, as I just said. And in terms of water quality, the years and years of experience will be with our next guest coming up after the break. The driving force behind the Pomahaka Water Care Group, Lloyd McCall, will be out with us very, very shortly as yet another land champion in the last edition of this year's Farmers Weekly.
This is Sarah's Country.
Really pleased we got into this. Thanks for your help, Dave.
It's a good idea, honey.
You reckon it'll come out? Cover it in talcum powder, leave it 10 minutes, and you'll be fine. Good call, Dave.
Good call on getting those security cameras, Dave.
You call a new one yet?
Yeah, kind of.
When you've got decisions to make, we'll be there to help you make the right call.
I'd go for those ones, Bob. Yeah, good call.
Did you choose these?
Oh, you know.
For great advice and insurance, talk to FMG.
Thank you so much if you just joined us live. Welcome to Sarah's Country. Now, water quality, if you follow along with Sarah's Country, is dear to my heart and every single New Zealander's, including our farmers and growers in this country. And it certainly has been a hot topic and a priority in our farming sector for quite some time, sometimes under wraps, with the Pomahaka Water Care Group being one of those groups based in Otago, who've been making a difference for quite some time, raising awareness that farmers can do what they can do to help. Their vision is for the Pomahaka River to be recognised as having the absolute highest water quality so that future generations can enjoy the river as we have. The words of our next guest, Lloyd McCall, member of this group, joining us now here on Sarah's Country. Thank you so much, Lloyd. And I think it's fantastic to have your name in lights as a land champion. I know that you'll probably not like that so much because, of course, you have been in the lights for some time when it comes to water quality. But it must be rewarding, though, being able to share your journey with other catchments and help them implement what you have with Pomahaka.
Sure, Sarah. Thank you very much. Namahi nui. I'd have to say that's really a highlight for me, is being able to share what we've been doing in the Pomahaka, because Pomahaka has been on quite a long journey, and there's a lot of other areas that are starting the journey where we were like 2, 3, 4 years ago, and it's like really awesome to see how they progress and are picking up the farmer-led model that we promote.
What were some of those key moments when you realised as a farmer that there was water quality issues and that you needed to do something about it?
I think back in 2014, the regional council had sort of like pointed the Pomahaka as being like a degraded waterway, rural waterway in Otago, and so they started having a series of meetings with land care and the other stakeholders, and there was one particular day when they put a graph up, which put a line on a graph that said this is water that's good for swimming in, and then they had the graph which was some of the water quality results from some tributaries that entered the Pomahaka that actually exited via our farm, and that was like, crikey George, the bars are way higher than the other line. It was like all of a sudden the only people that can fix this are the farmers, and that's pretty much where it started.
And you say in the article in Farmers Weekly that it came as also a bit of a shock to you because you had been reducing synthetic fertilisers and strategic only applications. What are some of those on-farm management systems that you have brought in to only enhance what you can do to have an impact on the water quality?
Yeah, I think on our farms here, we actually started before we realised where the water quality was. So we'd started reducing our use of synthetic fertilisers and started feeding the microorganisms in the soil. So we started basically feeding carbohydrates to get the bacteria and the fungi working better. So we basically reduced our nitrogen usage by less than half, like down to like 40 and 50 units. And we started using non-soluble phosphates. So, and over time that sort of carried on, and my son and daughter have carried on now, where we've taken out the stress out of the system. So we've de-stocked quite a bit, and we've gone to like a grazing on model with a low cost structure and with low inputs. So we've gone from putting in quite a lot of palm kernel and stuff down to just a grass only based system. And we're pretty happy with the way it's trending, to be honest. So if nothing else, we keep control of our own destiny. So we're all pretty kind of closed borders, which is really quite cool as well. And I'll have to say profitability hasn't changed.
I think that's a very important thing to mention, Lloyd. Thank you very much for slipping that in, because that is exactly the point. As they say, you've got to stay in the black to be in the green. And we've heard that quite some time when it comes to making those environmental changes which don't have a direct premium attached to them here in New Zealand. I mean, the thing I find really interesting, Lloyd, is that the change is so small and incremental over such a long period of time, and we're talking about age, and Joel being 26. I mean, they are in that generation of wanting, instant feedback, instant gratification, and wanting things done now. But it's not quite that simple, is it?
Well, it's not that simple, because if I go back a long way, as you notice from my hair colour, but we've been through the land development loans, and we've been encouraged to intensify all the way through, and it's taken quite a while to build up, and so it's took like 20, 30 years to build up, and it's going to take 20, 30 years to calm it down a little bit. And I think there's a realisation that we've met or exceeded our maximum potential or production off our land, and it's just going to take the time to alter our systems to the new normal, and the new normal is going to be a slightly less intensive system, but it's still going to be as profitable. And it's going to be so that we can have sustainable futures, like our motto says. It's all about future generations having the ability to enjoy the waterway as we have. See, I te keen at the Māori or te wai, look after the life force of the water, because to me, everything, the whole community, the whole landscape and the communities and the towns and the rural people, it all comes out in the waterway. It's a very tangible thing. So we can look after our waterways, our hawa. Well, then we know that we're going to have healthy communities, healthy land, healthy animals, and to me, that's what's important.
You talk there about time. However, the government are not doing much to understand that it takes time bringing in regulations really quickly. How can the farming community get control back of the situation?
I think it's really important that people understand where the ownership of the problem is. So we're very strong on the farmers owning the problem. So as soon as you have ownership of the problem, you know what your input is or what effect you're having on the environment. You can then take action. If you're just being told it's not your problem, it's the other person's problem. And this is one of the issues that we have when we get rules come in. We need rules to have bottom lines, but you've got to be really careful the rules don't become the upper line as well, because if you have ownership, you're going to go way beyond the rule, because you're wanting it for your family, your whānau, your future. If it's only there to meet a rule, you're only going to go as far as what you have to go to. So it's going to take time it's going to take time from move from one to the other, and it's really important that we wrestle that, we make sure that we maintain the ownership of those rules. The outcomes. We got to maintain ownership of the outcomes. And the rules, we're going to get there, but we're going to have rules that are functional as well, which is a bit of an issue that we have down here.
Sorry, Lloyd, I didn't quite catch that. What was that last part?
I said we've got to have rules that are functional as well. So some of the rules that are being, touted about and being brought in, they quite literally can't meet the rules. So we need to have workarounds. We need to put the environment at the forefront and not the process. And I think the process will work itself out if you have your end goal in front of people. You've got to get everybody working together.
Thank you so much. And another incredible land champion brought to us by Neil Wallace, the story in this week's Farmers Weekly, driving force behind Water Quality Group. And that is, of course, Lloyd McCall, who is a member of a very wider group known as the Pomahaka Water Care Group. And I know a lot of farmers personally in that catchment, and I know the passion that they have, not only for doing the right thing, but being able to get our story told wider, their story told wider of the work that they're doing. And there's some fantastic work going on with this new entity called Thriving Southland, where it's a collective of 23 catchment groups collectively distributing funds. And I know Lloyd McCall has been actively a part of that. I also want to give contribution to Janet Gregory, formerly of the New Zealand Land Care Trust, and her passionate work in establishing the Pomahaka Water Care Group back in the day as well. It's so fantastic, and I look forward to 2021 celebrating more and more of the great work of each and individual catchments. If you're doing something very, very cool in a catchment around New Zealand, please get in touch, sarah@sarahscountry.com, and I'd love to have you on the show to celebrate it, because you know what? One thing I get sick of is we need to tell our story better. Are you? That is my challenge for you next year. Lastly on the show, where does New Zealand rank globally for innovation in the biotech field? Biotech's Chief Executive, Zahra Champion, will join us to close the show as our last land champion of 2020.
This is Sarah's Country.
The recipe for perfect beef and lamb. Take one small fresh country. Make sure it's nice and remote. Now, keep it at the ideal temperature all year round. Next, mix in the farmers. They go perfectly with the nature of this unique place. Add regular sprinkles of rain to really bring out the lush meadow grass. Then let your animals happily graze on this grass all day, every day. And there you have it, New Zealand, the perfect recipe for beef and lamb. Taste pure nature.
Thank you so much for joining us here on Sarah's Country as we are about to wrap up the last week of the year for us, and we will be back mid-January in a completely unapologetic break, I've got to say. Michael Ross says, please can you extend a Christmas greeting to all of your audience. Let's thank those who manage our whenua and produce the fabulous food and fibre we will all enjoy over Christmas. Thank you so much, Michael. And Sarah Elliott says, well done, Lloyd and team. The Pomahaka Catchment Group was pivotal in inspiring our community to create the Hakataramea Sustainability Collective over 3 years ago. And this is what I love so much about Sarah's Country. And you bring in one inspiring story that can lead and ripple. And as I said there just before, issue you all a challenge. Let's celebrate the great work that you're doing by getting in touch with me, and we'll have a simple yarn, because that's all it is. It's just a yarn. And it can go far and wide. You'll be blown away. Now, strict border controls, southern geography and a good business environment have set New Zealand up well for future biotech innovations. And a published report by Biotech New Zealand, with global demand for biotech solutions, New Zealand is being found to be very well positioned for this in terms of solving the world's growing problems. We're now joined by Zahra Champion, who's the Chief Executive for Biotech New Zealand. Welcome to Sarah's Country, Zahra. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us on the show.
Thank you, Sarah. I'm really excited to be here, so thank you.
Now, the report has taken a broad OCED approach definition, approach about the application of science and technology. This is around biotech for those who aren't understanding of the definition of what it actually covers. Could you explain?
So again, biotech's quite a wide and broad definition. And so in New Zealand, we really talk about biotech from the traditional right through to the modern biotechnology. So most of you know you'll be using that traditional biotechnology every day, whether it's your enzymes in your bread, whether it's brewing beer, whether it's your plant breeding. However, we start moving into some of those more modern biotechnology tools where we actually start manipulating some of our organisms. So when Biotech New Zealand talk about biotech, it's quite a broad range here because, as you know, we have very strict laws around some of those very modern biotechnology tools that we can't use other than in the research organisations.
And this is the likes of CRISPR gene editing. Joel, just touching base there with you, is it possible if we get Zahra on the phone? I'm just struggling to hear clearly. Is a fine little screeching there, which I just want to ensure we've got the good quality audio for Zahra, Chief Executive for Biotech New Zealand. Whilst we get Joel on the phone, I'd love if you are watching along live, and as we started talking about it at the start of the show, Joel's birthday today, 14th of December. He's the big 2-6, and I know that he will be, his mother would love to be having a birthday dinner for him back in Belfast. She got in touch with us to say, could you please package up some of that very warm weather you were having, because it's very, very cold in the Northern Hemisphere at the moment. Joel, we went on a Christmas party on Friday, took the team up the Waimakariri Gorge, and we were jet boating up there, and Joel's still just struggling to get his head around a hot Christmas without it being a white Christmas. But Joel, you seem to be surviving okay. I'm not doing too well in this very hot studio. How's things looking with Zahra? She's on the phone with us now. Zahra, for those who...
Just 2 seconds.
Yeah, but it was absolutely fantastic. There's so many Christmas parties going on at the moment. And I tell you what, I mean, I'm lucky in that we've got a smaller group with the 6 of us, that we can do fun activities like go jet boating. But, you know, because there's, I don't know, I'm sitting around just looking at each other, drinking. You need an activity. So, you know, I'd like the amazing Christmas parties. There's so many activities on rural ones. I know there's, you know, cricket matches and tennis games and paintball shooting, or going and doing various different things. So wherever you are having your Christmas party, your staff Christmas party, do I dare say stay safe? You know, don't have too many and tell everyone what you really think of them. I've heard a few stories of that starting to happen already at some of the Christmas parties. But anyway, it's Christmas. It's all about cheer and love, isn't it? Now we have Zahra back on, Chief Executive from Biotech New Zealand. Zahra, thank you so much for joining us on Sarah's Country. Just checking that we're talking here about the report and the opportunities for New Zealand. I do worry though, are we stifling the opportunities for New Zealand being so limited with our regulations around the likes of gene editing?
Sarah, can you hear me on the phone?
Yeah.
Excellent. Look, absolutely. And for me, it's all around technology. And so it's around what are those technologies that can enable us to actually make those step changes. And so, again, as I talked about, we're talking about biotech, which comes from very traditional right through to modern biotech knowledge. It's not a for or against. It's actually about which tools do we want to use at what time. What are the risks? What are the benefits? And right now in New Zealand, we aren't even able to have those conversations. So there's certain times when you say, actually, no, the risk is too high. We're not going to use that technology. And that's like with any technology that we have open and offered to us.
We are celebrating that there is significant opportunity still for Biotech New Zealand and for New Zealand to lead the way in solving some of the world's problems. What are some of the successful patent applications from the university's research institutes that we should be celebrating?
Oh, look, I mean, in terms of, we've got significant number of patents coming out of the universities and the CRI. We're certainly seeing, in terms of New Zealand, a huge amount of information in the plant breeding, animal breeding. We've seen ag research with its wonderful grasses that can live in dry, hot conditions, but also they reduce methane as well. There's many, many examples like that. We've got some amazing examples as well with companies.
Do you think that our real focus on biosecurity here, we put biosecurity in the primary industry above all else in some forms, is leading on to us having a flow-on effect to be able to share how we farm, how we go about things with the rest of the world?
Yeah, and I think biosecurity and sharing knowledge with the rest of the world, those are two very separate things. I do believe that our biosecurity is absolutely key. We have, a wonderful disease-free status. We have that because of our location. The other side of that is that, yes, we absolutely should be sharing information with the rest of the world. We should be looking at what technologies the rest of the world is using, bringing them here, and vice versa. New Zealand has some fantastic technologies that can help the world as well.
How important is the government's industry transformation plans?
Look, I think they're fantastic. I work very closely with Agritech, so across the Agritech one, which was the first one off the rank, I see that there's a number of ITPs coming as well. But I think one of the concerns is that they're very sector-based, and we have to make sure that they all interlink and they all cross over. So a good example is biotech is not a sector, it's a platform. It sits across environmental, industrial, ag, but also human health as well. So you want to see that interplay across all the ITP, just the same as technology. You wouldn't just do, an IPT on technology. You'd want to make sure that it integrates across agri, environmental, industrial. But look, I think it's a great start. What I'm seeing is that they are pulling together the government agencies. You've got MBIE, Callaghan, MPI, MOH. They're all talking around how do we activate, how do we work together. And that is really transpiring to actually into the industry and actually going out and talking to the industry about how can we make a difference. I think it's fantastic. I really do. I think it's a great start.
The biggest thing I believe is that we are only as good as the adoption on farm. Are you concerned about it getting from lab into practice?
Look, I think there's an absolute concern, and we talk about, getting technologies out of the university, CRIs, and commercialising them. And there's that next step. So we struggle just to do that and then actually take the commercial product and put it on farm. I think there's a gap or a huge opportunity where we can start pushing a lot of this technology on farm. But it does require support. And I know a lot of the farmers are really excited about, those early adopters are really wanting to try this technology. But without the support and, you trial something, it may not work. You need somebody to come and say, actually, this needs a bit of rejigging here. You need to do this. So I think there's a real, I wouldn't like to say it's a hand-holding, but I think there's a real opportunity to work, closer. I just heard before, it's about telling our really good stories. Now, if you've got a farmer that's adopted some new technology, so these early adopters, we can really showcase those farmers for the next crop who are unsure or they don't know how to bring that technology on. So showcasing is absolutely key. Absolutely key.
Thank you so much, Zahra Champion, the Chief Executive for Biotech New Zealand, and all that you do and part of the organisation that has just released their report to say New Zealand is sitting on the cusp of massive opportunity for being very leading in its innovation. And Richard Rennie has brought together that story for Farmers Weekly called Bright Prospects for Biotech on farmersweekly.co.nz and in your rural news mailbox to kick off the week and end the year with the last paper of the year, talking about what Zahra just said on one of the finalists of the Zimmatic Irrigation Awards that myself and Joel got to visit on farm last week. You may have noticed a few pre-recorded shows. There was a really cool example of a farm and they had a very smart young man working for them who was also a pilot. So he loved technology and he mastered the fixed grid irrigation system and the technology around it. So much so that they actually gave him a day off a week to go and contract to show all the other farmers in that region how to utilize it and what they had done on farm. How great's that? It's fantastic, because we're absolutely only as good as the knowledge that we can share beyond the farm gate with each other and within our own communities. I've thoroughly enjoyed this edition. It's been very inspiring, and we've got more of that again tomorrow live from 7 o'clock. And of course, if you do miss anything, don't forget to subscribe to Sarah's Country on podcast, and maybe tell the odd person or two about a great interview that you heard, because of course we would love you to share and that continue to snowball and be a ripple effect. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Sarah's Country, and we want to end on saying a very, very big happy birthday to our producer Joel Rock, who has been my rock in 2020. That's your birthday present, Joel, just me saying that live to everybody. Thank you so much. In the meantime, good night and go well.
This is Sarah's Country.